This work is devoted to an inquiry into the mysterious part played by the star Sirius, regarded in accordance with both occult tradition and certain modern speculations as a binary system of twin suns in the awakening and early flowering of Egyptian civilization. Above all, in that dynastic epoch when the pharaohs bore sway over the two lands. Our purpose is to demonstrate that Sirius was no casual ornament of their sky law, no trifling embellishment of priestly fancy, but a central and potent influence in the moulding of Egypt's spiritual and cultural life. In ancient Chem, the heliacal rising of Sirius, its first reappearance in the dawn sky after a period of invisibility in the solar blaze, was observed with the utmost care. This radiant emergence of Sothis heralded with striking fidelity the commencement of the Nile's inundation. Thus, when it is said that the year was reckoned from its heliacal rising, it is meant that the Egyptians took this first dawn appearance of the dog star as the sacred signal by which to measure the rhythm of the floods and to order the great cycle of their calendar. Yet are we to suppose that for a people so steeped in symbol and hieratic thought, Sirius held only a crude agricultural significance, serving merely as a celestial water clock for husbandmen? Was Sothis nothing more than a convenient stellar pointer by which they forecast the swelling of the river? Or did the wise men of Chem discern behind its practical utility a far deeper import, spiritual, cosmic, and esoteric? Those whom the world terms mystics and occultists are the students of the hidden side of things, the custodians, however imperfect, of inner traditions and veiled doctrines. They seek to pass beyond the shifting appearances of the material plane and to apprehend the subtler, invisible orders of being, wherein, as they affirm, lie the true causes of what men call reality. Among such students there prevails a teaching that Sirius holds, as it were, the evolutionary key to the destiny of our Earth. In this view, Sirius is not a mere distant luminary wandering in the abysses of space, but a spiritual focus, a cosmic center of force and intelligence, linked in profound and intimate fashion with the unfolding of life and consciousness on our globe. It is regarded as a higher sun behind the sun, a great teacher and transmitter, from which streams forth the guiding impulse that shapes the inner evolution of mankind, anchoring upon earth the vibrations of a more exalted order of mind. If, as the esoteric schools affirm, Sirius has stood from the beginning as a guiding star in the evolution of our planet, then its influence is no transient accident of the present cycle. That same hidden current must continue to flow, shaping the destinies of Earth and her humanity as we pass into new turnings of the great spiral. Indeed, it is held that, as the race advances toward higher stages of unfoldment, the Sothic force will become ever more apparent, its workings less veiled, its presence more consciously recognized by those whose inner sight has been awakened. The ancient priesthood of Egypt, the hierophants who guarded the sanctuaries, preserved the sacred rites, and transmitted the arcana of temple wisdom, are themselves said, in the occult tradition, to have drawn their most secret doctrine from a far older source. Before the great cataclysm, before the deluge of legend swept away a world, there stood, we are told, the mighty civilization of Atlantis. Its people, the Atlanteans, were a race endowed with vast psychic powers and a science at once spiritual and technological, such as our present age can scarcely conceive. If, then, the priesthood of Chem stood as the heirs of Atlantean gnosis, it follows that they must have possessed not mere fragments, but some portion of the profound cosmic science once cultivated upon that vanished continent. Among the most jealously guarded of these arcana would have been the true doctrine of Sirius, its hidden office in the great drama of terrestrial evolution. To the vulgar eye it was but a brilliant star. To the initiates it was known as an evolutionary key and a central spiritual beacon, linked indissolubly with the upward march of humanity. It is therefore affirmed in the occult tradition that the Egyptians did more than honor Sirius in their public festivals and in the regulation of their calendars. Sothis, the dog star, was likewise enthroned in their most secret and potent rites. Within the inner precincts of the temples, far from the gaze of the profane, there were ceremonies, initiations, and magical workings in which the forces and intelligences of Sirius were consciously invoked and directed. These rites, reserved for the higher degrees of the priesthood, were designed to attune the soul of the initiate, and through him the soul of the nation, to the guiding currents that stream from that stellar center. The labors of the archaeologists have laid bare no small portion of the early life of Chem, both in those pre-dynastic ages which preceded the first crowned rulers of the two lands, and in the later dynastic period when the pharaohs sat enthroned and the kingdom stood outwardly well ordered. Ruins of ancient cities, sepulchres and tombs, shards of pottery, implements of stone and metal, carved monuments and inscribed stelae, all these speak to us in manifold detail. And yet, for all this profusion of relics, the first chapters of Egypt's earthly story remain but dimly outlined. As a landscape half hidden by a veil of mist, her true beginnings elude the searching eye. Who, in very truth, laid the foundations of the first cities of men? From what hidden source came those primordial rulers who bore the scepter before history had yet learned to write their names? By what agency did complex and ordered knowledge break suddenly upon the human scene like lightning from a cloudless sky? When no sure answers are forthcoming, the restless mind of man hastens to people the silence with conjecture. Into that empty space there flow theories, surmises, and woven tales. Thinkers, investigators, and writers of every school advance their several explanations, some cautious and guarded, others daring, even audacious, each seeking to cast a ray of light upon the great enigma of our forgotten beginnings. In the valley of the sacred Nile there comes a moment, as we turn the pages of the past, when a fully formed and flourishing civilization stands suddenly before us. We behold cities already ordered, temples raised in majesty, a system of writing in active use, an elaborate administration at work, the arts in no mean flower, engineering accomplished on a grand scale, and a complex spiritual doctrine woven into the very fabric of daily life. Yet when we consult the archaeological record, this high degree of organization does not appear as the end of a long, clearly traced descent from rude beginnings. The expected procession of half-formed principalities, crude edifices, and tentative fragmentary systems is strangely elusive. Instead, the phenomenon is that of an almost abrupt efflorescence, a culture which shows itself sharply defined, as though it had passed over intermediate stages with a single stride. Such a sudden blossoming runs counter to the conventional dogma which insists that societies must climb laboriously, step by step, from the simple to the complex. According to that doctrine, one should find a long and visible prelude of proto-states and embryonic institutions. But in Egypt, at this crucial juncture, we are confronted rather with an accomplished fact. An advanced civilization standing on the stage of history as if it had entered from behind the veil, already robed and crowned, its earlier transformations hidden from the gaze of our later age. Besides the witness of stone and shard, there has come down to us a vast treasury of tradition, the sacred myths of Egypt herself, the later legends cherished by her priests and people, and the testimonies of the Greek and Roman writers, Herodotus, Plato, Diodorus, and many more, who sought to glean from the temples of the Nile some ray of her ancient glory. In these scrolls and narratives we read of Egypt's primordial past, of her gods and divine kings, of her mysterious foundations, and of a wisdom that seems at once profound and strange to our modern ears. Yet these venerable traditions do not fall obediently into line with the carefully arranged scheme of official history as constructed by the orthodox Egyptologists. Often they clash with the accepted chronology, hint at other origins, other cycles, other catastrophes and restorations than those admitted by contemporary scholarship. Thus there yawns a gulf between the voice of the myths and the verdict of the academies, a dissonance which itself becomes a further enigma. Which image approaches nearer to the truth? That of the ancient seers, or that of the modern critic? Or is there some deeper synthesis, as yet unperceived, wherein both might be reconciled within a larger and more occult view of Egypt's destiny? Among the many lights that jewel the firmament, there was for the men of Chem one star that shone with a sanctity all its own, Sirius, whom they named Sothis, the divine dog star. Upon this radiant watcher of the eastern sky, the ancient Egyptians fixed a steadfast and reverent gaze. They bound its heliacal rising to the very pulse of their existence, to the flooding of the Nile, to the reckoning of their sacred year, to rites of renewal and resurrection. In their calendars, in their temple ceremonies, in their myths and hieroglyphic symbols, Sothis appears again and yet again as a key of cosmic order and spiritual mystery. Such persistent and exalted veneration of a single star, described at times in terms that hint at a knowledge deeper than mere peasant stargazing, ill accords with the narrow and prosaic picture drawn by the more conservative schools of Egyptology. In our own latter days, certain investigators have turned their attention to remote corners of the African continent, where small and little contacted tribal peoples have preserved in the secrecy of their traditions a lore of astonishing antiquity. To the surprise of the learned, it has been discovered that some among these tribes possess very ancient and remarkably precise knowledge concerning that same star which the Egyptians so deeply revered, Sirius. The lore in question is no vague sky myth or rustic fable. It contains what can only be termed accurate astronomical data, indications of the star's nature, position, and peculiar behavior that appear to transcend what could easily be gathered by unaided observation of the night sky. Such precision in stellar lore, maintained by an isolated people without telescopes, without written ephemerides, and without the elaborate apparatus of modern science, seems, even to sober minds, to suggest contact with a far higher source of knowledge. It bears the stamp, if not of our present civilization, then of some highly advanced culture whose methods and instruments are now lost to history. From this there arises, almost inevitably, the question which the materialist is least willing to pose. If these humble tribes did not themselves elaborate such intricate astronomy, whence came it? Who, in the dim recesses of time, placed this knowledge in their keeping? There are those who have ventured to suggest that the abrupt metamorphosis of mankind from scattered primitive tribes and pre-civilized groups into fully organized cultures was not the mere outcome of blind terrestrial evolution, but the result of a tremendous impulsion from without. In their view, the so-called quantum leap in human development, that sudden and disproportionate ascent, rather than a slow and measured climb, was precipitated by a direct encounter with intelligent visitors from the depths of space. According to this bold hypothesis, these beings were not denizens of our own planetary chain, but inhabitants of a world revolving in the system of Sirius, a star which certain esoteric traditions have long affirmed to be binary, composed of two suns in mutual orbit. It is claimed that this celestial intervention occurred some 5 millennia ago, in an age veiled far behind the earliest clear outlines of our recorded history, before Egypt had fully raised her temples upon the Nile, before Sumer stood complete upon the plains of Shinar. Nor is this daring hypothesis the sole key proffered for these enigmas. Other avenues of interpretation lie open, and they may, to the reflective mind, appear no less plausible. It may be that the humble custodians of this stellar law did not receive it from visitants of the outer heavens, but indirectly from a great civilization already established upon this globe, an earthly culture whose powers of science and invention far transcended what our modern manuals are willing to admit of ancient peoples. Such a vanished civilization might well have wrested the secrets of Sirius from the sky by its own exalted methods, through instruments and modes of observation now utterly lost to our present race, or through sciences of a subtler order than those which our age exalts. It is likewise conceivable that this great terrestrial civilization itself once stood as the first recipient of a super-terrestrial visitation, that the mysterious intelligences from beyond our world did not address themselves directly to the simpler nations we now study, but to a far older and mightier race, which afterwards became the intermediary, transmitting the stellar wisdom to Egypt and to other lands. In such a view, what we find preserved in later times would be but the diluted echo of teachings originally bestowed upon a vanished high culture that served as the appointed bridge between Earth and the cosmic powers. At our present stage, we must confess that we move amid hypotheses and educated surmise. The fragments of evidence, though suggestive, are not yet sufficient to permit us to speak with dogmatic certainty as to which of these pathways is the true one. Let us then hold the mind poised, neither credulous nor obstinately closed, keeping open the doors to all these possibilities. Direct contact with beings from beyond our planet, indirect transmission through a lost, exalted civilization of Earth, or some intricate blending of the two. We shall next turn our gaze to the testimonies of the Egyptian priest Manetho, through whose pen there has come down to us a fragment of that more ancient tradition wherein gods and semi-divine beings are said to have walked side by side with mortal men.